Good evening to our guests online and committee members in the room. This is the official opening and call to order of the Durham District School Board Special Education Advisory Committee for December 2024. As it is our election night, I will chair until the election of a chair, and at that time, SEAC chair will take over presiding over the remainder of the meeting. So we'll begin in a good way with our land acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and our schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, live, and learn. And then, based on the commitments of the Durham Board, as well as this table, the Durham District School Board recognizes Indigenous rights are distinct. In the exercise of those rights, Indigenous staff and students shall not be subjected to actions with the aim or effect of depriving these distinct rights. The Durham District School Board is committed to providing learning and working environments that center human rights and equity and are safe, welcoming, respectful, equitable, accessible, inclusive, and free from all forms of discrimination, oppression, harassment, and harm. We will begin with roll call, and I will go last, so may I turn it to my left, please?
Yes, Eva Curiakides, Association for Bright Children. Elizabeth Daniel, member of the committee.
Miller, trustee for Ajax. Michelle Arsenault, trustee for DDSB.
Lisa Ray, representative from Durham Secondary Administrators Association.
Tara Kelly, Durham Debt Center Association.
Rowan Jarvis, Durham Disability Association, Durham Region.
Melissa Cook, Durham Elementary Administration Representation.
Don Edwards, trustee for Ajax. Spencer McBurrow, Autism Ontario. Allison Amer, Easter Seals, Ontario.
Connor Jacobson, System Lead with DDSB.
Andrea McCauley, Superintendent of Inclusive Student Services. We do have one addition proposed to the agenda under section 9, which is a discussion of SEAC membership in follow-up. It's being received. And so adding that, may I have a motion for approval of the agenda? Michelle and Donna, right? And with that, we will move into the election of SEAC chair. So the SEAC chair will preside over the remainder of the meeting once moved into place. And so again, it will be nomination from the table with the nomination confirmed by the individual willingness to stand. Where there are 2 or more members nominated and 2 or more agree to stand, each shall be given an opportunity to speak briefly, and then we will vote using a ballot system. The member receiving a majority of the vote of the members present and voting shall be declared chair. As there are 9 voting members in the room, 5 would be the declared majority. And we will also, in the ballot system, appreciate that if we do have 2 or more candidates, Lisa and Melissa have agreed to stand as the ballot counters as non-voting members and administrator reps. So with that, I will open the floor to nominations at this time for chair. Tara?
I should. I nominate Eva Curiakides.
Thank you so much. Eva, do you accept your nomination?
Yes.
Thank you. Calling a second time for nominations for chair from the floor. And calling, good evening. Calling a third time for nominations from the floor. Seeing none, we would declare Eva claimed to the position of chair, and thank you for your continual leadership of the committee. I greatly appreciate it, and with the confidence of the full table.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for your confidence. We will move on to the election of the vice chair. Much the same way as the chair, if there's 2 or more, get an opportunity to speak. If not, we'll, after that, we'll go for the vote for the majority of the win. We declare the winner. Can we get a nomination from the floor for vice chair?
I nominate Tara Kelly.
Tara, do you accept? Yes, thank you. A second call for nominations from the floor. The third call for nominations from the floor. Okay, Tara, you're claimed vice chair. All right. Thank you as well thank you as well for your continued leadership around this table. Okay, then we'll move on to item number 5, which is approval of the minutes from November 7th. Has everybody had a chance to review those minutes? And are there any questions or concerns with respect to those minutes? No? Okay, if there's no questions or concerns, can we get a motion to approve the minutes from the November 7th meeting? Elizabeth, second by Tara, all in favor? Okay, motion passed. Okay, we'll move on then to the staff report, starting with the ISS impact update.
Yeah, so thank you so much. This month, we have a look at our practical learning program. So practical learning program of all of our special education program classes remains probably our widest and most largest in terms of volume, widest spread as well in terms of class type. There's a focus on literacy and numeracy skills that are really focused on those daily living aspects and how students are going to be moving towards those daily living skills and in support of the daily living skill development that's happening within the classroom as well as that one of those other major foci as well. When we look at any impact update, we always want to bring voices from community as well as from students. I really enjoy sharing voices from students when we get to do that. So I'm going to share a couple of the quotes. And I mean, there's lots of context that comes with these quotes, but I can definitely share this. I think it's nice to hear that it's like a second home and a second family. That means we're actually making sure that there's that community within the space. I like that you give me independence in the kitchen. And I also think that we learned that it's important to get fresh air and that walking helps your mood. These are all things that, again, we can all resonate with and that we can all kind of see some of those components. And when we look at those functional literacy and numeracy skills, it's really looking at some of those alternative expectations and how curriculum moves and is tailored towards what those daily living activities are going to be looking like. Down the road, as we've heard from some other impact updates, we have some students moving towards our transition to boarding program. We have students moving to out-of-date programming, as well as among other opportunities that are part of that. So it's that lifelong kind of moving towards things. The classroom team, they definitely have a lot of integration from our wide inclusive student services team. Just along with a lot of our other students within our regular class, when they are part of that mainstream regular class program. And I also want to highlight that a lot of the things that our students do within our practical learning program are a lot of things that we can also do and that we see the school team putting in place within our regular class placements as well in support of students. So they're doing some of that functional literacy, they're doing those daily living skills. And it's important to be able to highlight that it's a fairly smooth transition when we do see that. The other component as well, I think it's also good to highlight that in support of those daily living activities. In a lot of the spaces, we do work with facilities and be able to purposefully make sure that those spaces are set up to be able to function and to be able to focus on some of those daily living activities, including access to kitchens and kitchenettes and access to things like laundry facilities and being able to make sure that we're working on some of those skills as well. So it's great when you get a chance to be able to pop in and to be able to work and to be able to see some of those classrooms as well, because I get a kick of going into any classroom, but I definitely love visiting any of our practical learning programs as well.
Notify, both Melissa and Lisa are at schools that host the program. The student quotes this month did draw from 2 of our schools, including Lisa facilitated a student group at Fort Perry that drew many of those comments. So I don't know from an administrator's perspective of connecting with families, not to put you on the spot to comment, but you are both at schools with the program. If there's anything further that you want.
Yeah, so I'll say I've worked at many schools with many practical learning programs. And I would say every single one of them is different in many ways because the kiddos that make up the classes and the teachers and staff that make up the classes is different. The biggest piece for me though, that's consistent throughout the schools that I've not only worked directly in, but also as a facilitator, is that just to go from what Connor said, that piece around developing our students in a way that services them when they leave our building, whatever that age might be. So working through things such as like the school I'm in right now, we run a newspaper program. So when it comes to functional literacy and numeracy, it's all over, right? You can think of many examples when it comes to that. Navigating the transportation systems, all that kind of stuff, all practical things that are going to really help them meet their full potential when they leave us here at DDSB. And that's consistent in all of the PLPs it's a pleasure to be in over the years.
Just to add to that, I've been on 2 schools now with practical learning programs as an administrator. They are definitely my favorite rooms to be in. This year, just kind of pushing just the integration, I think, so that's the one thing. They're definitely not excluded from a building. They're definitely a part of the everyday student population. They take on roles. We have a breakfast club, and so they help organize, they set up bins for the classes. And we're now at the point where there's a lot of integration with kids coming in and the development of just that social relationship that they're having with other peers. And just to see that develop in the last couple of years has been beautiful, just because they feel like a true member of the full school community. And it's just really great to see, as well, and which I think is equally as important, is how our mainstream students are learning how to have those conversations and how to interact, and then also how to help be supportive. So that is also great to see. They do a lot of fun things. They do like art, they bring around treats and coffees, and they just have a lot of fun, so.
Yeah, I think it's great, and I think also from my elementary perspective as well, coming off here as well, when I think about a lot of the skills that are being built through there, a lot of those opportunities that we hear about, those are all opportunities that a lot of our students through regular class and that mainstream classroom as well, that regular class placement, they also have those opportunities built towards that, as we always look at tailoring and individualizing programming for students within their regular classroom as well. And that's why, as part of the practical learning program, it is a partial integration program. And we want to always make sure that we are maintaining that, because it is a really critical component of it, because again, when we look at it from that practical learning component, it's important to be able to maintain all those connections and to be able to continue those connections as well. So I appreciate kind of bringing up all those really neat points,
We'll pause for any questions or comments, and then we'll do the same.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Allison.
I was just curious, Connor, if you could explain at what age the elementary program starts and what some of those practical or life skills might look like at the younger end of the spectrum.
Yeah, for sure. So we do have a very limited number of primary junior classes. Typically because we are get students in that grade 3, grade 4 range, but it isn't necessarily exclusive to anybody in any particular range. We don't necessarily hold a particular range, but we also want to say that we do know the value of remaining within that regular class placement to be able to make sure we're capitalizing off of all those social interactions, we're building on all those skills, and we're building towards all of those components as well. So some of the things that we would like to speak to, some of my experience at my previous school, is that very similarly, we would, our teams were integrated with our, when we called it our fall week, we had it our fall week and support for our community as well, where we would have tickets that would be coming in to be able to pack some bags, and sometimes it was for our, it was clothing that was going to families, it was clothing that was going out to students, it was clothing for other things. So part of it, once we received the clothing, we would make sure it was washed, it was folded, it was placed into the right things. Shelves were labeled to be able to make sure that we have right visuals, or working on that functional literacy as well around what that looked like. And then also fulfilling the ticket in terms of that. So sometimes for some students, it's also communication and how we're working through that, making sure that we're always in vetting of that rich communication, which again, is that partial immigration. It's things that we work on in that regular class placement, but then we also, look at continuing doing anything that would be in partial immigration as well.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions, comments?
One of the things that we looked at, so this is an update from us, but it's really a proposal to the table, was that there is immense value, in the expertise you bring around the table, the consultation you provide us as a district around programs and services, and the breadth of the range of topics that you give consultation on across the school year. We have not in Durham done an annual report from SEAC. And so what we're bringing forward is a proposal that we do so. Just showing those highlights of consultation, advocacy, and the integration around the table and the expertise and heart that you bring. And so what we did was we went back through the minutes from January to this point, as well as our agenda for this evening, and tried to grab those salient points or areas of focus. I know sometimes the topics mean something to us around the table that were part of the conversation, so trying to layer in enough understanding for an external audience in terms of the value of SEAC. Again, we're always trying to promote the committee itself and the members and the expertise around the table, as well as embedding where there was association highlights as well and wanting to make sure that was in there. So we came up with two versions. The 2-page is still 3-page. We would tweak that in formatting. So one is more kind of robust and has a few more details to it. The other, the idea would be to get it down to 2 pages. I also think it's important, and you saw circulated today, even Tara as your current chair, vice chair, but in the construction wrote it reflective of 2024, wrote a paragraph that would sit on top of the document as well. Again, recognizing the appreciation around the table, but also how that ripples to us as a district. This is a legislative committee. It is one where the legislation meets the requirement, but it does not speak to the quality of how we influence impacts our decision-making. And most importantly, how it impacts the experience for kids in schools and for families. And so it is with deep appreciation and gratitude that we suggest that you highlight your own selves in an annual report from SEAC, and that we do it based on the calendar year, because then it sits a bit separate and different than a lot of other annual reports. The only report that comes in kind of at this time traditionally is the director's annual report. Is based on the calendar year. Most of the other plans and reports are based on more of a school year calendar. So it would make sense with the election cycle, as well as just putting it off cycle from a volume of reports going public. So we turn that over to you. We would obviously, up to you to decide whether you would like to engage in this or not, because I do think once you start something like an annual report, it becomes habit and practice. It would not be able to be pulled out of the committee. So it would be putting that kind of around the table. So for your consideration, the concept, and then if okay with the concept, to direct staff in terms of what volume you would rather see from an accessibility perspective and access to community. Once we get content, we would ask creative services to obviously brand it with the SEAC logo and colors. And we could also talk about how that would be communicated out to the system. So I'll turn that back over. I know we kind of wedged it into the department report, but we'll turn it back over to you guys for consideration of SEAC.
Okay, did anybody get a chance to take a look at the, like the sort of draft annual report? Because, I mean, I like the fact, I know we post our minutes on the website every month. But those minutes are lengthy and detailed, and there's a lot of extra stuff in it, and sometimes pulling out the most important things and kind of putting that. People are maybe more likely to pay attention to actually what happens around this table. And, you know, we have been for many years, one of our goals has been making, you know, sort of that awareness of SEAC being put out there, right? So, I don't know what you guys' thoughts are on it, or questions or comments or around the table, Rob?
This is to be done annually or monthly?
Annual.
Annually, so we would
Yeah,
just
it's an annual report.
review all the reports, and I apologize, review
No.
everything and anything that pertained to what we brought to the table, we would sum up, and take out the most important points, and then
Yeah, like pulling out sort of like, I guess it looks like here, the draft looks like they're pulling out like, right now, the draft is showing like the district literacy plan. Right, and sort of the highlights of the input on that. And then, February is talking about the consultation regarding, engaged on standard 9, the special educational placements in section C. SEAC, in the community engagement, advocacy focus, that type of thing, so. Pulling out kind of the main advocacy of, because there's a lot of the meeting that we have that is informational, and then there's the advocacy portion, and I think that's the focus is on that part where we're actually advocating, or reviewing stuff and commenting. So Donna, go ahead.
Yeah, I did have a chance to look at it, and it's great for highlight points as far as some of the things that we did discuss, but I think from, it still reads across as a perspective from staff, not from SEAC, not from SEAC members. And so like, I would really like to see that, we actually reviewed, we reviewed such and such a, brochure or whatever, and so all of a sudden I can't think of which ones we've done, because we've done a lot over this year, but we consulted and reviewed and provided feedback, those types of things that need to be put in here, to show that the actual work that everybody has put into, to it, but right now it kind of reads very much like a staff report, no offense.
Yeah, well, and that's like, good, that's important, right, just to point that out, because that does matter, if it's gonna be a SEAC report, then it should be a SEAC report, so. Allison?
I did have a chance to look at them, the two reports, and my initial response, or my initial thought was to go with a shorter version. I have since revised that. And then because for the reason that you said, the minutes are already on the website, so the shorter version would suffice. But I'm now rethinking it and thinking that I like the idea very much. But I think the longer version really nicely hits a midpoint between the detail of the minutes and then the really shortened version of the 2-pager. So, and I think if we agree that we want to do this going forward, we can sum up the contents, sum up a meeting shortly after each monthly meeting, so that we're not doing it all at the end of a 12-month period, trying to remember what were the important contributions that were being made and that sort of thing. I like the idea very much. I think it also just adds weight to who we are, that we are required to submit a report, or that we desire to submit a report. I think it adds a bit of weight and credibility.
Yeah, and I think it does highlight the really valuable work that happens at this table, right? That a lot of people really aren't that aware of, so I think that's fantastic, Anybody else? Yeah, Elizabeth?
I may be 2 steps behind here. I think I might have missed an email or something, but can you just clarify this is meant for public consumption and it would be something on the website? Okay. That you can share through your associations as well, and I think we would share it with parents and caregivers, through our resource teachers as well, promoting that consultation with and inform that.
Yes, go ahead.
I was just thinking of an idea of like, sort of like a newsletter, but I'm not sure how formal this is supposed to be in terms of like, is it like just mostly the advocacy pieces, or is also what was shared right in there, like some of the important internal work as well, but just, so I wasn't sure like how formal it was, but I thought of something more engaging, like the e-letter or it's something that just has a bit more of like, it's in addition to what we already published, right? So that it has that sense of community and.
I think my only concern about an e-letter is like, how often, who's gonna do it? on a consistent basis versus kind of like a once a year
Yeah.
thing, right? Because often I find newsletters can fall by the wayside when you don't get the input for them, right? It can be hard to keep them going and engaging. I think the key for this is to highlight our work as opposed to like what's going on behind the scenes at the board. Like it's what they're bringing to us and what we're giving, the advocacy we're giving back to them, the feedback, right?
But I just meant for like format, not necessarily, just in terms of how it looks, they would look more engaging, like that format. that you
Yeah,
see.
I don't think it would look like this, right?
No, yeah, so that's why I
It's
guess
just very,
maybe
yeah,
like,
yeah.
because it can be as bright, as colorful, as community based as even some of the things that, even the good news that we shared in the room as well, like some of the highlights that that share about, what's happening, what's exciting, what's, I think that brings in community.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely would want this to be, you know, all of the boxes like looked at for accessibility and readability and all of that stuff, right? It would have to. Yeah, but I think, you know, it's just kind of highlighting the work, I think, that we've done. I think that's kind of the main thing. Because we do pretty significant work around the table, and I think if you were to ask a lot of parents who even maybe know SEAC, but wouldn't know one thing we consulted on all year, right? That made a difference. Right, so, is what I'm thinking. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just to Kelly's point, I love the idea of doing, a yearly impact statement, document. That's what else I'm sharing about. It really confirms and solidifies the work that we're doing. But if it's for public consumption, it has to be written, like, it has to look like it's for public consumption.
Right, for sure.
And, I'm kind of thinking of where does people's voice come into that? Aside from just reporting, this is what was done and this is how we spoke to it, or how we impacted it, or how we advised, or how we whatnot. So maybe just sporadically through it, and this is just the graphic part of it, is having what somebody said, how that impacted their organization, how that, like how we heard the report from the educators in our space, talking about what's happening, like just nuggets of that.
Yeah.
Because as a parent, that's what's going to draw me in, and then I'm gonna go and look at the details.
Yeah.
But if it's just details, it's like, this may as well, why am I reading this? So I think, you know, to Kelly's point, and we've had this point before with other things we talked about. I think that is like the real key part. Yes, it has to be formal, it's a formal document, totally get that. But I think families need more than that now and are expecting more. I think our audience is changing. Young families view this kind of thing very differently
Yeah, no,
than some of us who are a little more seasoned in this space.
I mean, that's a fair point. I agree. Like, I think, I mean, I would be interested to see what the communications department, when they pretty it up, what they would do to look at it, but I do agree, like, you know, I guess it's hard to go back through a year and pull out that sound bite of stuff here and there, but we could probably look at some of the stuff, because I know that there is some things that have been said around this table that's been very wise, right? And great comments and stuff that are, you know, we can pull out, right?
And I think from a process perspective too, so this was planting the seed.
Mhm.
And we didn't want to bring you a concept that's kind of an end of a year without doing the homework to say, here's kind of, remember where we've traveled. I 100% concur. We also wouldn't want to be presumptive, in developing through without SEAC voice to the comments around, this is about the work of the table and the advocacy of the table. I also think from a work perspective, we don't go to a creative services team until we have locked content, because otherwise they're recreating every time we change something. So process would be for the table's consideration, what do you want content to be? Because I hear there's support for a document. I agree, we echo in terms of the impact, and energy and excitement of what gets put. So then we would need content lockdown for us to then go to our communications team for their assistance in the marketing and formatting aspect of it.
Okay.
And then we can capture some, and it also goes to, I think Alice's point, blending the two comments. If we were to do something, then on an ongoing basis, we could be capturing and recording through the year. Highlights that were very salient to membership itself, and impacting and capturing those as we go in a growing document.
So, thoughts, do we go forward with the 2024 year, or do we start 2025? Going forward, where you can pull those things, and it's almost like you're starting fresh, instead of looking back, starting moving forward, really, right? Like, that's a possibility, or do we also try and do a small version this year? Like a shorter version for 2024, that's maybe doesn't have all the little perks that we would like to have for going forward, just to put some awareness out there. That's, yeah, go ahead.
Just a question, really. When are we looking to put this report out? Okay, because the timeline is very important as well, and if we really wanted to capture everything, and be very detailed, but still very easy for read for, families, that takes a lot of work, and, I don't know if we want to, or if someone has the time to pull everything from last year.
Yeah, that's
That might be a little bit hard to do.
Suggestion would be, if you're too far out of January, then 2024 becomes dated, tucked away, thank you. So if we were to do something around kind of either initial and further for 2025, we could even embed that in the 2024 to say we look forward to. Or we won't, but I think if we're too far past a January release of something, then it's a bit funny. I think once we release our January minutes, that's kind of what 2024.
And I do like I do like taking like little nuggets out of every meeting. And then instead of having to go backwards, because you're also losing that feel, like in a meeting, everybody might be on to something and have so much information to put together. But if you're trying to remember it months later, it's lost that.
Tara?
So I'm just gonna go out and say, I think that it would be too much work and a lot of crazy trying to get 2024 solidified. So I would suggest we do it for 2025, but if we wanted to figure out what that content and what that formula was gonna look like per month, why don't we go back to last month's agenda, since it's relatively fresh, and see if we can come up with a draft of what the November highlight reel would look like, and then that can help solidify, that's kind of what the content would be that we want, 'cause it's not too far out. We can, just as a thought, just if anybody wants, we can try and pull something together and then float that, and then as we going forward, Jen, et cetera, we kind of already worked out how and what we want this to look like from an overall content perspective, just as a thought.
Just to verify, this would be an internal one?
Yeah, kind of like
So
draft it out.
It wouldn't be
and
publicized, it would just
Yeah,
be
we
for
can
us.
figure out how we
Yeah.
want to present ourselves in that context, sort of speaking to what Allison and Sherry were saying, just saying, how do we blended the credibility and the weight that it deserves, but then still have that relevancy and punch that we want it, that's gonna be read and useful. So, and that will take some finessing and some finicking, so do we try it? And then play with it, and then by the time we get into January, February, with the actual meetings, start with that, just as a thought. I like playing with things, like trying to, versus, you know what I mean, like that.
And I mean, in our draft there, we do have some highlights to already start off with it, because they've already summarized it, like there's November that is there. So we could actually play around with what we have there and say, what are we missing, and that, in that summer, it's already somewhat there, so you have something to start with, build on, right? But I agree that we're, you know, coming up, because it's just, I look at just the timing in December and everybody thinking else in a short time to get something up in January is would be a little harder for everybody.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think Tara's idea is really efficient, that we work on one, this is the template we want to use, and then we can make sure that we have that summary done, and it'll be very easy to put the report at the end of the year.
Does anybody recall any great tidbits from November?
We had a great presentation of the Durham Nelson Association that's there, right?
Very true.
Which is very true.
Yeah, that is actually one of the highlights,
Yeah.
right?
That's one of the highlights that they have in there as far as that is concerned.
People did not know what Down syndrome actually was. The science was really cool.
The
Science
science
was really
was really
science.
cool. One of the things I think, if you were doing a highlight for November, you could highlight what is behind the day, the World Down Syndrome Day that you brought forward.
March 21st, 2021.
Yeah.
Right? I think that is something you could pull out and go, hey, did you know?
Yeah.
Fun fact. Right? If that's what you're looking for, that little off sidebar, that little kind of, you know, cloud in the corner, right? To say, hey, here's, it's funny, because this is the great part, right? Once you start talking about it, you kind of go, oh, yeah, how about,
Yeah.
so. Yeah, at the will of the group, do we wanna?
I say go for it.
Huh?
I say go for it. It sounds like everybody's in agreement as far as.
So we'll pull up something for November, see if we can make it pretty, and then say, is this the template we wanna use starting in 2025? Cause is that what we're talking about here, is like, this isn't something we're doing to kind of actually put out there, but more bring back and say, this is
Yeah.
what it could look like. Tweak that so that we use that template going forward.
Can I do a yes and?
Okay,
So from, sorry. So from a yes and perspective, because we do a lot of work with our creative services team and they're brilliant at what they do. They'll have a really hard time doing 1 month that sits within 12 months and trying to get you something that, like, I think you absolutely can from a content perspective. I don't think it's a fair ask from a formatting perspective, because the months won't sit in isolation. The months will sit as a 12-month document, and that will, like, it won't be one format pasted 12 times. They would flow and wrap the text, and so I don't think it's fair for us to go to them and say, could you? I think what we could say is SEAC would like to do a year at a glance. We would like to keep tight to 2 pages for 6 months if we were doing accessibility that way, lengthwise for time and for families. Or we would keep to a 4-page format. What would that scaffold kind of look like for all 12? And kind of, we'll pull out highlights, can you draw? But it wouldn't be 1 month replicated 12 times. It would either be, can you give us a frame for 12? We'll input as we go. Or we just do content, and then once we get the content, we go with them for formatting. It's because we're not gonna see 1 out of 12 in isolation and be able to tell you what the final product is. It would cause them to rework.
Yeah.
yeah,
I was thinking, because like, the template would be one thing, but it may have 3 or 4 for the 1 month based on the topics that go around the table. And when we come to November-ish, there's a committee that reviews all the submissions and makes a flowing annual document from it, but not using templated format.
right, yeah, like I was just sort of like getting an idea, I guess. I wasn't really explaining it, but more sort of getting the idea of what is it we want it to be like, right? Like, how do we want it to, the information to kind of flow, right?
It's kind of like a template of what makes this point important, why do we want to capture this
Yeah,
information.
yeah, like more or less like, what kind of highlights do we wanna have? Like, you know what I mean? And then it doesn't have to be the same, you're right, like 1 month it might be 2 or 3, another month it might be 1. right? Or, it all depends on what's going on, right? But then and the information is gonna be different. Some months there's more consultation than there is other months, right? So,
For, me to hear an authentic, sincere voice, right? I would hope that we would have the opportunity to have like a discussion about something and we'd be like, that's a great point, that's a highlight, can we take note of that?
yes, yes.
Right, so it's not just a scripted, right, but also like our real voices.
Yeah.
That does make work harder for Lisa, for Lisa, right, because she has to be able to hear us say that's a highlight and then capture it in that other place.
She wasn't feeling 100% and didn't want to cough in the room, so she's upstairs.
Yeah, and seeing what Lisa captures in the minutes, I think if we said that's a highlight, she'd have that's a highlight and it would be in there, right? Like,
I think so.
I don't think that would be hard to do in that sense. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, Kelly, go ahead.
I was thinking on that, along that line, is like, if we just came up or even suggested some key themes, or if, like, we just established what kind of things we for sure want to select out of it, because if there's like a lot of highlights, we want all of that, like, I think it just needs some type of, like the coding, like something that just lets us allow us to select and then go from there. So I had like key themes, key discussions, celebrations, it could be any words we choose, but I just wanted to have something that would at least allow us to navigate what exactly we want to take out, so that would help the team that's gonna be working on. To kind of narrow it down, or at least we came up in the room to share some of those.
Yeah, Tara.
Rowan and I were chatting on the side, sorry, but that idea, like maybe we categorize the types of stuff that go through this is like in the realm of advocacy, like you wrote a letter or things like that, or presentations that were, policy discussions, we advised on things like that, miscellaneous. Adam had a really great time at a party, or, whatever, successes or highlights, even some of the, if any of the association reports come in and specific things about, highlighting the different organizations might be really good as well, just sort of helping, continually to boost and buff the awareness of all of the associations and all of the people that lets them sit around the table. Something like that, like some categories that might help. Oh, that's one of those, that's one of those, one of those.
Yeah, and the category is not, you might not have every category every month,
We might not,
but you know what the types of things that will draw your attention to it.
Without it growing to the minute.
Without it,
Yeah, it's gonna keep you on your toes, I think, right? If you're trying to get it between two to 4 pages put together, you can't have every category every month.
No,
but if something really
with depending upon the agenda.
Yeah.
We should sketch it out.
I already saw it.
So when I think of administratively, right? I think that if for it to be successful, you have to have a standing committee that is at least at minimum in November gonna start reviewing the information, fucking out, because some of it will be repeats, right? Fucking out all the relevant pieces and doing the first content piece before it goes to communication.
I think so too, Ron.
Just to add to that piece, something similar is that perhaps we use the November open forum period to go through those points, to prioritize, to determine what we want to include and what we might either push back for another time. We can, because logistically, we only see each other once a month. We're all gonna email to a point, but probably the first gonna say, I don't always read the minutes when they come out, I don't always do that. But we would have to stay on top of this, because it's all going into one big bag. Well, the idea of a bunch of several smaller bags per category, and put them in categories, is gonna help Lisa and by extension us at the end of the day. And so I think, one, we should use that November period to go through it as a group, because it's all of us, all of our voices that we want to have live in that document. And then secondly, in terms of the format, I was just thinking, I believe now that I just heard we have a creative writing department. I had no idea what it was about.
Formatting and design.
Formatting and design, my apologies, formatting and design. I do think we should rely heavily upon them to provide some suggestions in the sense of, here's what we're looking to do. You're the experts at this. Can you provide us some formats that we can perhaps take a look at and determine which might be the best off the information? But we just, then this is where in my mind, the November idea comes in. You know, we start off with the initial ideas, come up with something, give it to them, you know, as a consultant, they come and give us several ideas, we look at it once. And then once we have that, then we can move forward, because I'm just looking at logistically, making the draft report, and then getting the new report for February, and we're only gonna see each other twice. So we have to look at that logistics aspect as well, right? So I think these are just some of the thoughts running through my head.
And I think what was stated before is it'd be nice if you went out with the January minutes. We're first week in January. So realistically, that has to be ready.
It's
for
February,
February,
with the January draft.
Right,
because the
I think it's the
January,
latest.
yes.
Otherwise, 2025 will be
So,
behind us.
yeah, so okay, so the first thing is, who thinks we should start for 2025? And should we start do a vote, do we want to start 2024 or start 2025?
just, when you say start, you mean to publish?
Like, so are we gonna put out 2024? Or are we gonna put out 2025? Right, so who wants to put out 2024? Yeah, sure.
Okay, based on what the suggestion was, I'm just trying to wonder, I don't know, I think we can narrow it down, but because of the advocacy pieces that what we're saying we want to highlight and we want to talk about from the SEAC table, more so than just what's internal. There was a lot of things that happened through the year that even just can be minimized and shared as kind of like, what does SEAC do otherwise? I think that's valuable, so that's just kind of my reason why I think we capture some of 2024. Like advocacy actions, we had a few items of those this year. Where do you think
We did, yeah, we did.
We did a lot of stuff.
I suspect that. I guess just to kind of to nail something down, because I think we have to make a decision, right?
Are putting out something quickly that isn't representative of the conversations we've had at the round table. And then next year we put it out the way we do like it, and people aren't receptive to it because they've already received it in a more educational, intellectual format, right? But then also I just think about the time. We are December 5th today. Who is doing that work? And how quick?
And it's a very busy month for everybody, right?
The shop,
And just to, and the opposite could also happen. You throw something really quickly together and it's very draft-like because you don't have a whole lot of time. And then next year's is more thoughtful, more this, more that. People reading the old one might not want to read the new one because they're like, that's just a draft, or that's just, they might not want to read it because they've already seen that portion of it.
yeah, I think that's, yeah, pretty much echoes the same. And I tend to agree with that. I feel like if we can't put something quality out, then it may be worthwhile to wait and do it quality, right? Because, you know, you have one shot at a first impression, right? And, so that, I don't know, that's my kind of thinking. Yeah, I'll go ahead.
Just another thought to avoid the big panic in November of 2025 and trying to pull it all together. I wonder if there would be value every quarter, for example, in looking back at the notes either that Lisa has put together or that we've all contributed to, and just, you know, summarizing what would we say about this quarter. Maybe even the report could be quarterly, and that way we've condensed it. We can keep it within the page limit as opposed to monthly. The other thing I was going to suggest is, what if For example, we just had a running Google Doc that we all had access to. And the link to it could appear in the agenda every month. And we just, any of us at any point during a meeting could just plug in a comment into the section that's, you know, the quotable quote section or the advocacy highlight section, and we just created a kind of structure. And we all had access to the document, so we all had editing permissions. And then it's open, we can all see what each other has valued about a particular discussion or meeting, and then we use that quarterly to compile highlights for a 3-month period, so we're not panicking.
So,
November.
you know, part of our agenda, we have the open discussion. We could quarterly carve out, you know, not even an open discussion, actually, we could put an agenda item quarterly to review the last quarter comments and do it around the table quarterly, but still do an annual report, because I think if we're going to our creative services department every 3 months, it's a little bit, we're asking more, you know, more from them, because they have to keep doing that work, whereas they do it once with the one annual report. But that also doesn't leave us, you're right, waiting till November, and in November, we could put that full chunk of time to reviewing it before it goes out in November, like November to go to the creative services department. That's another option. I do like the idea of the Google Doc though, that's a really good.
I'm happy to set that up, and I can just put in some of the categories that I've heard here tonight, but because we would all have editing rights, we could all plunk in category ideas, and by quarterly, I just meant internally that we do
Yeah,
it,
that we do it.
as opposed to having anything go out for public.
Not going out the rest, yeah.
So we were talking about, are we doing 24, are we doing 25?
Yeah.
Are we supposed to do like 24 and then have formal voting and then a motion for the 25, or are we allowed to just?
I
I just wanna make sure that it's fair on the table.
Sorry? I mean, Donna is great with all of this stuff, I have to say, but I feel like this kind of thing is not,
We're still in.
like, we would
discussion.
vote, I think, on a final version, like we all approve this final version, right? We don't necessarily have to vote to,
This is open discussion as far as it's concerned, it isn't until, unless you really had to say that, you know, you had to have the people on it or whatever. But I think there's somewhat consensus, a lot of the work that is done here is around consensus, right? So
Yeah.
you can do that, but you're right, when it comes to a final, that, I think that
the final version.
the final version, as far as that, yes, we're going to produce an annual report. That's the thing that you want documented, that will be an annual report, and, you know, and then, you know,
Yeah, so we do a vote on, yes, we're gonna do the annual report, and then the details are all just amongst us, and then the final version of the report. Before that goes to printing, we'd all review it and vote to say, yes, we're putting this forward for printing, right? So. Before we put anything to a vote, are we thinking 2025 to start? Yeah, okay. So does somebody want to make a motion for us to start putting together an annual report beginning in 2025, Rowan? Allison seconder, all in favor? Excellent, okay. And Lisa can actually put together the Google Doc, she'll just attach it to the minute, to the agenda each month, and then we would have that, so it'd be just as easy. Okay. Okay. Then so that was our year at a glance. Moving on then to board reports.
Go ahead. All right, so we had the board had its December 2nd board meeting and study committee. We had a report for the two SLGBTQIA Compendium of Action for Students, Staff, and Family. And that report can be found online in the agenda package under the report section. And then we also had the motion to approve our SEAC member at large. So congratulations to her, and the board did approve
the motion. So I'll turn it over to Donna if she has any additional.
Just that the compendium action is the first draft, and it's going to be going out for consultation. It's similar, as far as that's concerned, so it was just sort of the first draft. And so we're really excited because it ties everything into a really good document with an action items and so forth, that it how it ties it into the strategic plan. It talks about basically the cycle of review as well. Similar to our compendium of action for our Black Youth. It's basically the same way, so we're looking at having, eventually we'll look at having different methods of providing input into that document. We've had basically online, and we've also had in person and sessions and so forth, so we're really looking forward to see now moving forward.
Yeah, it is a great document because there also is community resources listed in there. And one of the things that I've seen lately that's really great, thanks staff, is that there is a great list of terms and definitions. And it's in that package. So if anyone wants to take a look, they should go on the website, on the DDSB site, and have a look. It's really well done.
I was gonna say, yeah, if we could all have circulated, that would be great, and I would love to see it.
I brought my board agenda, which has the draft in it, and we can go around
Awesome. That's
right
great.
now, but it is, can be circulated.
Any questions with respect to the board report? And just as a reminder to maybe those who are watching online, the member at large that was, confirmed by the board was Jessica Wells, as our new member at large. Sorry. Well, that's okay. All right, we are going to move on then to our presentation and discussion around SEAC parent and caregiver survey for spring of 2025.
All right, thank you. It's that time again, right? We want to be able to make sure that SEAC, again, being part of the last process, that is my first experience with the process. I can say it seems that we gleaned a lot of information from that particular survey and being able to then use it in a very actionable way. So whenever we are putting out anything publicly, we always want to make sure that we're aligned with our multi-year strategic plan. So knowing that this is something that is new this great compared to the last time, we want to definitely do a look at some of the surveys, some of those components, and some of that thinking around it. As always, because there is the focus of this being special education, we want to make sure we're including aspects of the special education plan. And any of those components that we really think that we would need, that as associations, as families, that you would definitely want to hear more about as SEAC as well, and as this committee. And then thinking as well around the how of some of this too. And some of the components that we would want to think about bringing forward through it. Last time the focus was around some of that communication and really understanding some of those goals around communication and what was being communicated, how it could be received, how is it coming back, and really with that focus around there, and then that kind of matters components as well. There's always good repeatability in data. If we put something similar, that would be there. Then it's looking at you have measurables that are coming from those data points and what work has been done, or where are we sitting right now compared to it. But there are also those points when sometimes going novel is also important as well. But it's really the will of the group and the will of the committee as well to be able to look at that. We definitely want to bring back some of those components and to start putting it in motion, because when we think about some of the timelines, this typically goes out in spring. When we look at this, so it means that through January, February, we really want to, as a group of the committee, we want to really be narrowing down everything that's there, making sure that the survey is exactly where you would like to be able to move forward around that. And then through the spring, and then we determine what's that window of communication and to families so that they're aware and to group and to everybody who wants to make sure we're getting their input in, and then actually doing the survey and actually bringing that out. But again, it's the will of the group, it's the will of SEAC in terms of how things will be looking. But I think it's a good topic of conversation right now to be able to look at what data do we really want, what data should we be considering, and where do we move from that point.
You're pulling up, okay. I've just asked Andrea to see if she can get her hands on the survey, the last survey we did, because there are a number of people sitting around the table today who weren't a part of that, and I think it'd be very helpful going forward if you can actually see what we did the last time. I think we tried to keep it very simple the last time. We thought of what is it we want to know, right? What is it we, what do we want to get out of it? And so what we decided I think last time is what was working well, what wasn't, what could use improvement. And I can't, this was the third thing, but I can't remember what it was, which is why I think pulling it up was helpful, because we actually did get some fairly good information back from it, and a fairly good response that we hadn't gotten in previous years. Going back, we stopped doing it for a long time because we weren't getting enough data to make it relevant, like enough feedback to make it relevant data. So I think the last time we kept it very concise, and it made we got a lot better response to it, so. Yeah.
One of the things that, Judge's team, when they put it together, there was opt-out sections, so if you wanted to continue providing more feedback, you could, or if you just wanted to answer the first section, you could, and then you could say, carry on your merry way, so we gave families a lot of options in terms of, here's, 30 questions and you have to finish with sort of, you kids know, you can finish this section and say, do you want to add, to provide more information here? Yes, no, and then allow them to use it, giving them the options for that, so, which is, because people don't got a lot of time these days, so something that they want to get, this is what I want, go, and then, really quickly, so that's.
Yeah.
How's it fit community?
I'm just wondering, I think you said we're gonna maybe have a chance to look at it, but I'm just wondering, were they all open-ended questions, or was it like a Likert scale where you would say, how satisfied are you on a 1 to 5 kind of scale, or was it both?
Yeah, we did, we had and we also had a couple of spots where people could put in their own comments, right?
Yeah, so for those of you that have your devices, Lisa circulated on November 8th in an email titled additional information for SEAC. And then Connor's gonna put it on screen for us.
Oh, is that okay? Okay. So, I mean, it's good because you have that discussion then around this table, and the great part, I think, is it highlighted concerns for parents, right? So. Yeah, so something, we also want to be very careful too in making sure that the way this was done and the questions we asked wouldn't unintentionally identify a student, right? Yeah, okay.
So I think if we're going back in terms of what the conversation was, is you can only ask for the information from a data integrity perspective that you're going to mobilize and use in service of the kids. And so I think in the members that were at the committee at the time, I will remind it from off, that we had conversations around, did we want it to be about individualized experience, or did we want kind of global themes for what we need to work on as a district? And we started with global themes, and then SEAC narrowed to global themes on communication, awareness of the IPRC guide, awareness of SEAC. And so then we got to municipality tags versus school tags, because we weren't going to use the information down to a school level, because we were going to look at district communication versus school communication. So I think that's where we had landed that at the time, because if you ask, the more detailed information you ask for, you do need to be ready to enact and utilize the data in service of the kids. That's consistent data practice, our student census, our well-being surveys. and things like that. And we also had conversation around this table around the sensitivity and care for the parents and caregivers that we're asking this information of in terms of differential time pressures that they have in terms of time and space to give feedback. And so that's where the length of the SEAC agenda. Years ago, the version was make yourself a meal, sit down and do it. And we wanted it kind of within the length of time it takes to have a coffee or a glass of water or things like that too. So just, and the flexibility of response time. So sensitivity to who we're asking and what we're gonna do with you. And then as Connor said, the only way to know if you've had an impact on intended actions is to do a remeasure of certain items. So Chris and the team kind of gave us, we talked about it briefly last month or the month before, of what items do you want kind of as that check on action, and if you want novel action or not, or if you want to repeat the survey, or if you want to pull a couple questions and go with a novel area of focus, that's up for committee decision.
Maybe we should take a look at some of the sections on this, and then that way people can see around the table, because I would say at least 50% of the table wasn't part of the last one, right? Was it here during that time? So these sections are here are just kind of general, you know, municipality grade of the kids, and just kind of give us an idea. Because we did find number wise the difference between in certain areas between elementary and high school, right? We saw satisfaction differences, right? So so this is, yeah, this one is mainly on the question number 3 was on, you know, sort of the communication you receive from your child's support team, like at the school, so teachers, servants, et cetera, at the school.
Do you want an example of something that we did as a result of this?
Yes, yeah, that would be helpful, yeah.
Sorry. So one of the areas of growth that I identified in the previous survey was the consistency with which the guide to IPRC was given to parents and caregivers. Legislation is annual requirement. Good practice is giving information in a timely way to families. And so when we did the software changeover for us, again, as staff, we have standardized the letter of invitation to IPRC, and we've actually embedded the link to the guide right in the letter. So there is no not receiving it in terms of that logistically, but then there could also be a how, like, again, a parent reading that and knowing that it's an annual invitation letter, does it land for them that that's what that is as a link, or does it need to be a concrete hard copy? I'm not suggesting that putting a link in an email is actually authentic receipt or invitation, but we did make sure from a compliance perspective, the link is in the letter of invite that goes to all families, initial and annual review. But that came from the survey and parents and caregivers indicating that they weren't consistently receiving it annually. And so just taking some actions, including reminders to certs and different things, but physically embedding the link so that it can't be missed.
Okay. Yeah, so then it's the next one. Yeah, so under communication, because I think, yeah, we had this broken down into a few areas, and this one was around 3 things that are working well in terms of communication and 3 things that could be improved upon. Right? As opposed to taking it from what isn't working, we're asking what can be improved on, so it becomes more sort of, yeah, it's collaborative and it's sort of constructive, right? So.
And our areas for improvement.
Yeah.
The families are brilliant.
Yes.
It's what we need to do in improved partnership with them.
With them, exactly, yeah, exactly. And then this one was for the inclusive student services. How familiar are you with the parents? This was the guide that we're talking about. Very familiar, somewhat familiar, slightly familiar, not at all. So they're getting an idea. I mean, how many parents are receiving it, knew about it, that sort of thing.
There's one of your opt-outs. Number 7 there.
Number 7 there, yeah, yes,
You wanna answer some questions? Yes or no?
yeah. If they said yes, it would have taken them on then to the, identification placement review committee meetings, and then the questions about that. You know, about receiving enough notice, getting communication around the meeting. And for the opportunity to provide input before the meeting. And allowing them also to put in their own comments in that area. And the assessment, copy of reports or assessment materials that were being discussed at the meeting. I mean, some of these reports may have come from parents, but sometimes the reports come from the school board, right? So, and that's, I guess, if it came from the parent, then it would be sort of not applicable, they would have already had it, but. And then rating their experience on, how comfortable they felt in participating, how receptive was their team on their views and opinions, how productive was the discussion, and how satisfied were they with the outcome of the decisions, right? Because we wanted to know if parents were feeling like they were a part of the process, or did they feel like that they went in with the decision already made on things, right? So that was what we were sort of looking at there. And then information about their placement, just sort of asking general question of are they in a regular class with indirect support, et cetera, the different possibilities. With also the option to say, I don't want to tell you, and I don't want that information in there, right? And then an opportunity for them to comment on that. And then administrative education category of exceptionality. Also the ability there to sort of select child's identification. That one didn't have an opt-out, did it? Didn't have a preferred.
It says select all that apply.
Select all that apply, so they could just leave it alone if they didn't want to, okay. Yeah, and then an option for them to sort of share whatever they wanted that maybe wasn't covered. Yeah, go ahead, Allison.
I'm just wondering if we want to know for question number 13, 12, how satisfied are you with your child's placement or where your child is currently placed? Was that your first choice? Are you hoping your child's placement will change? Are we interested in knowing, whether this outcome with respect to their placement is one that parents are happy with? And we kind of ask if they were happy with the outcome with respect to the IPRC meeting, but that doesn't necessarily pertain specifically to the placement.
Yeah, I mean, there was the opportunity to comment on their learning environment, but that question itself could be changed, right? Were you happy with the placement? Could be changed, right?
Part of the IPRC though is about discussion about the placement of your child in that
Right.
year. So we're recommending placement X. And there's the conversation say, are you okay with that placement? So
Right.
that's kind of part of the baked into the IPRC itself. So
Yeah,
I can kind of sort of see it's sort of answered with the last one, say, are you happy with the outcome? Saying if you are in agreement with placement, then yeah, I would be happy with the outcome, but I'm not happy because I want them to be in a PLP class, but I don't have option, and I want them to be in mainstream, or
right.
I need, withdrawal, or I would like a placement that doesn't exist in my area and we can't, whatever the circumstances are, so it's.
I just don't know.
Do you wanna be explicit too, so.
Yeah, I think I would have thought we would want to give them an opportunity to say, those specifics, like, yes, I'm happy that my child got this placement, but this is what I would have preferred. This would have been my first choice, and I'm not sure we would necessarily just get that from the question above about how satisfied we're with the outcome.
So, I don't know, I think you should.
I think just in terms of, I agree, like, yeah, that's important information to have. I think in terms of construction and buckets of the survey focus was on communication. And then we needed some demographic information to anchor the context for the communication feedback. So part of the reason for asking a placement was, are parents of children in special education classes receiving more communication than somebody in regular class?
Right.
And so without the, where does your child access learning? We couldn't desegregate what SEAC was looking for out of the communication question.
Got it.
I think your question is a very wise one. I think that changes the survey focus, right? And then, so it's just teasing out kind of what the buckets are for the survey.
Right.
And then what are the questions that I have? Because I think there would be a lot of questions that would be extremely valuable information. The risk of not starting with what does SEAC want to learn more about in terms of the bucket is the survey grows to immense lengths, and now we don't get response because the families don't have the time to answer them. But that was the rationale at that time, for it to kind of go, so anything not communication based was demographic to understand the communication responses.
And now, do I understand correctly that we're open to considering a whole other?
Yeah, this is
focus?
just what we did the last time, so you
Right.
have an idea of what we did and what it looked like, because it's hard to visualize something,
Right.
and put something together if you haven't.
So how will we know what other options are available to us for that bucket, for example, whether it's
That's
communication?
the
That's the
discussion.
discussion at the table.
And so there's
Discussion
no,
here.
we're not
Yeah.
choosing from a list of 6
No,
options,
no,
it's whatever we, okay, got it.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you.
sort of gets narrowed down from the table discussion itself.
Got it.
Elliot, I know you had something?
I'm not sure if this was already answered, but going back, okay, so two things. So the focus was on communication, and I'm kind of, off of what was just shared, I'm just gonna go to my question because I kind of lost my thought of it. But my question was kind of in terms of the part questions that we had, and I was kind of like listening to both you, but what I was thinking is a question that I asked about where the parent or caregiver is not satisfied, like something that's a bit deeper that prompts the opportunity to share that feedback. So if the topic was on communication per se, so there's something like if you were not satisfied with X, Y, Z, what could you suggest or what would you, like something that just directly addresses that? Because sometimes I feel like parents are not comfortable maybe sharing, and so they're just forced to pick a number and then maybe comment if they choose. So if they say, for example, give one, they do not comment one. So if you ask it a little more direct, it gives an opportunity to share maybe something that wasn't satisfactory to their purview, right? So that was that. I think what I wanted to know in terms of the communication topic was, is there a reason why the focus was just communication, or communication segues into the other pieces together? Like I just wasn't there.
I think it landed on communication the last time because there was a lot of discussion around parent involvement in the IPRC process and the information that was being provided to parents. I think there was a lot of the SEAC members in general were getting a certain amount of feedback from their, from the community with respect to being given different information in different places. So in different ways of being told kind of different processes, right? As opposed to what was necessarily the actual process. So we sort of wanted to get an idea from the parents and, and sometimes parents feeling like they don't know what's happening within the school itself. So that's why we focused on communication, because we wanted to know what their level of communication with the school was and the involvement in like, the opportunity to provide that feedback.
Yeah, Tara, just adding on to that, and because I think we've talked about that subsequently, like this year as well, as talking about that whole conversation about communication. and building that relationship and establishing trust and the rapport kind of thing. So I think that sort of resonated the most with us because it was around the table, and you could definitely hear people going, well, that's not been the experience that my family's been talking about, or, but no, I've been great, my school's fantastic at this. And so it was not a consistent voice, so we thought, okay, let's start at the bottom, say, let's talk to each other and figure out what does that look like. And so that, I think that was sort of like that main driver, so you can, I guess, extrapolate a lot of different things based on, if you guys aren't even talking to each other, of course, no one's happy with anything. But if you are talking, you guys are having, you have that relationship, establish that trust, okay, chances are those relationships and centering around the child is going to be a lot better versus it's always a combative relationship, you know, those sorts of things. That I think was sort of where we get focused and kind of the reasons why it's been coming up a lot lately as well. So that's kind of one of the big pieces, I think. We wanted to start simple and small and contained and not have a 50-page thing. So, okay, this could be the start of stuff and then, okay, now.
Because it can go wild pretty fast.
Yeah, we took a while to pare it down to that, if I remember correctly,
Yes.
because we had a lot of questions. Like, Donna, you remember, we had like all the great, like ridiculous numbers.
And it was over many meetings, so it wasn't
Yeah.
just one meeting.
It was a lot.
And, it was hard to figure out what our focus was, what we wanted the information for. And we had a consultant.
Yes.
We had a
That
consultant who
was-
came in and helped us
Yeah.
streamline the questions and helped us focus. What is it that we want this time, right?
Yeah.
So next time can be a different focus.
That's right, like, so this was communication, nothing to say a survey, 2025 survey is communication, so completely different, right? This is just an example of how we focused it, so that it didn't get to, you know, you were having dinner, you know, to fill this out, like it wasn't a long, because we have to remember that there's lots of families who have children with, you know, needs that they don't have a half an hour to sit down and fill out a survey. If they've got 5 minutes, they're gonna give you, that they could be taking for their own peace and quiet, you're lucky. So I think we can choose whatever focus we want it to be, but that focus needs to be contained into something that's manageable for families, I think is what it comes down to. Allison?
I was just going to say that the survey can be set up such that you can stop and save your work and come back to it, so that it doesn't have to all be done in one setting. And they get an email saying, you know, when you log back in to work on the survey, click on this link. And that might be useful for people who start and then realize how much more there is to go and just say, forget it, and close the screen and don't come back to it. That's just a thought that we might get higher numbers in terms of returns.
My only fear with that, and I'll think my fear is that they'll forget about it and not come back to it. I feel like if you get them doing it on the first place, you wanna get it
That's
done.
my fears with work, when you have to work on the survey, on my own spare time.
Yeah.
While I have the child who may or may not be sleeping, may or may not have ate yet. I still have to read the communication books, I still have to pack my lunches, right? The feedback we got from the consultant was short, quick, over a coffee. And if I'm not correct, we did get good participation.
We got very good participation from parents. And there's a couple of us sitting at the table, Donna, Tara, myself, who were here with the last version was done, and it was significantly longer. And the problem is, the data return was useless, because we didn't get enough input, because it was just too much. And parents just went, I mean, and also keeping in mind, especially in the elementary level, many of these parents have gone just recently gone through a series of assessments and questions and discussions, and they just are like, I can't do more, many, so.
Yeah, I just pulled up the, initial summary from 2023, and you had over 1,100 responses, which was a good return rate. And then also just reminding CS that, when we went to the 2023, we did translate the survey into the top 7 spoken languages by Durham families, and so we'll need to work that into the timelines to have, translation services. And so the longer the survey, the time on the families first and foremost. Second is, what translates well across languages, and also the time to do that in terms of the survey happening.
So one thing I do think though is that, the parents who have the most to say, they've had comments, right? And if we look at the comments, and if there's trends in the comments, then maybe we have to put out a long form survey or hold an in-person focus group for those families. But I think it first comes from a simple survey and build from there.
And, sorry,
Yeah, go
I,
ahead.
I was just saying, you know, to build on that, that might be one of the questions, you know, after the survey results are, you know, are you willing to participate in a focus group? Just as simple as that. And so that, you know, we can then, you know, clarify afterwards, and that's something that we could work into as such, right?
Absolutely. I think our first goal here would be to decide on a focus. Whether it's a repeat of communication with changes or something entirely different. And that's fine too, like, all of that's fine. I wonder if we could circulate a copy of this draft to the group, just so they have, you can have that to look back on, and that maybe we could mull over and have this as an agenda item next month for us to talk about potential focuses. Because I think it's hard to sit down, you know, it's survey time and then just sort of come up with an idea, right? And I think that, you know, to give people some time to sort of think about what they're hearing and what they think maybe the concerns are out there. Doc?
I was gonna say, not only because, as I said, we have many new people here, it's not only the survey, but the results as well, because they have.
That's true, yeah.
People around the table.
Results
have
actually,
it, right, so that they get an idea of what we did receive.
Yeah.
Right, and as far as that was concerned, and that will frame sort of like, maybe we still need to ask those questions, some of those questions.
Yeah.
And we change, you know, just a few of them.
Yeah, Tara?
Am I
Yeah.
not mistaken, but didn't you take the survey results and we actually embedded them in one of the presentations at the beginning of the school year to say, hey, this is what we heard.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is, you know, this is, we did a survey, this is what we heard. Go. If I recall correctly, we actually gave it to administration.
Yeah.
And sort of like the welcome back to school,
So that was brought to, you know, teachers and stuff within the schools. So,
We have that, I think, in Lisa's email.
yeah,
Key findings.
yeah. So,
And then what happens to it? So we collect the data, are collecting data every year?
no, so the last survey was done in 2023, so we would do like every couple of years, because we just find if you do it every year, people lose interest in it. But if you do it every couple of years, it kind of gives people a break from it, and then they go back and we get better.
Actionable items from.
We
the
did take
survey.
action, yes, we
So
did.
we have revamped the IPRC documents for parents, for community, as well as for staff, so that they're more in line in the communication piece, which was our focus. Hopefully has improved.
That's even more of support for the annual impact.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that would go into it.
Yes, exactly.
Because families that have children who have a variety of different needs are surveyed to death.
Yes.
You get surveyed at the hospital, you get surveyed at the doctor, you get surveyed in every aspect of your life. And when you're applying for ODSP or certificate, like all of that is form filling and it's exhausting
Yes,
and it's invasive.
and that's why you wanna keep this simple
Yes.
and to the
But
point.
not only simple, I need to know what the result of me giving you my information and sharing my story,
What are you doing?
whether
What are you
positive
doing?
or negative.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
I need to know what's happening with it. So
We
if that
have,
could
we
be
have
added
preamble
to
on
it, not
this.
just take the survey and then maybe I'm gonna find out what happens to it in something that's sent out. But on the survey saying, this is going to be used for, what's the purpose of this survey happening?
So I wonder, like, right at the very beginning of this survey, there was a blurb, right? There's a letter. This can be changed to say, our 2023 survey told us this. This is what was done. So that parents who are gonna fill this one out, go, oh, they use that information.
Or even
Right.
like when we do an impact.
And in fact,
Annual.
yeah, definitely there for sure, 100%.
Yeah.
But even to get parents, because that is a bit older now, but that, to get parents to look at this one, to say, yeah, I did this before, oh, and they actually used it. They actually used the information that we gave them before, so it's worthwhile doing it again, because they're listening.
I would say that that's part of that aha highlight moment, is that we're tying what we got from survey, this is the work we've done, and this is, because of your survey, this is the summary of the work we've done that reflects your feedback, and so we tie it all into, in the end of the end report, right? So it sort of sets that framework up, right?
100%, yeah. Yeah. So,
I was just gonna ask if it's possible to just kind of hear each other's ideas about what the focus might.
yeah, that's what I think we should focus, like, next, like, January
Okay.
discussion, we should talk about, like, what we think. And that's why I said, like, give everybody a chance to kind of get their head around what maybe they'd like to see a focus is, and then have that discussion. Because that's how we're gonna end up narrowing it down, right? Is hearing what people put forward and then going, yeah, you know, and then people start adding to those things. And you end up coming up with a sort of a theme or focus on it, right? So. Is everybody okay with that we add that next month?
And then would you like us to book research to come in February? So January SEAC says this is the proposed area of focus we want. Staff take that away and draft some proposed questions that might get in that direction, and then research comes in February to work it through, finesse the questions with you.
Yeah, that works out, yeah. We'll put a framework and for going forward here in place, because I think, you know, it's a lot to kind of take some time to process it and step right, instead of just trying to throw something together quickly. Okay? Anybody else have anything they want to add to that? This discussion before we move on? Okay, so we'll circle back around next month. Okay, the business arising from the minutes, the parent guardian, special education, identification placement review committee, I think that was one document you circled.
Yeah, so we really appreciate, the feedback from SEAC. I went through it, moved slides, adjusted language, pulled off language. Before we go to doing the voiceover recording, we wanted to come back and say, do the changes reflect the feedback you gave us? And if not, we will tweak it before, engaging in, the recording and sharing out. We are hoping to get it out prior to the start of annual reviews, in January. So I think just that if there was any questions as you're reviewing it, we can take those this evening, or the invitation is, could you please let us know by this time next week, because we really do need to move into doing the accessibility and voiceover prior to the December break in order to get it out to schools and families for January. So happy to take any questions around the table and or feedbacks that were received through a phone call or email over the next week.
Does anybody have any questions or comments on this for the moment? This one. Donna?
Just one comment about, because it's quite wordy on the thing on the, whether you agree or disagree, and I'm just wondering if that could be more in a chart.
Slide number.
I don't know what has the slide number in. It says, I don't see the slide number on
Or the title.
it. The title, it says it's IPRC decision, it's the second slide after that.
15.
So, no, decision there. Okay, the next one. That one, it's so wordy, and I'm wondering if there's could be somewhat of a chart in there, say, like a flow, a decision chart in there. You know, yes, no, 30 days, whatever, and break it out so it's more graphic and whatever, because that is a lot of words. That's the only comment I have.
So I'm just pulling something up in email, sorry, I didn't bring a copy downstairs, I apologize. And what I'll do is I'll leave it on my screen for after SEAC if anybody wants to prepare it. What we have done is, to that point, and it's gonna look really small when I turn on the screen, it's not, this is on Ledger, is literally ask and you shall receive.
You are so fab.
Crickety Jersey. Is that flow, and what we were going to do is attach this as an accessible version to the guide from a visual perspective, appreciating that the guide itself is very language heavy. And for those that are visual learners like myself, I will go into the document, but I want to work through a visual first to understand what I'm having. So we have checklists, there's some, the legislation isn't always specifically hyper clear. So we have checked this through council prior to going to creative services. And they've worked their magic, and this would be the alt text on this would not be box to box, though it would be the graphic itself is the visual image that would accompany the guide. So the alt text would be the title, not the box, because I think if somebody's looking for process flow, it would be the reader on the guide itself.
Yeah.
Totally hear you, agree, and happy to be able to turn it around, so I can, but happy to leave my screen up after the meeting if anyone wants to take a look at that as well.
Yeah.
But you have this slide up, I just want to highlight, underneath the line, paragraph underneath that line. Second sentence, or second line, IPRC, of the IPRC, but do not initiate it concerns, initiate.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you for the catch.
no worries, that's what I do. And you have a very obviously list.
Thank you.
All day.
So yeah, no, happy to take any feedback this, and then after a week from now, we'll consider kind of lockdown and we'll move into the production phase.
Okay.
Recording.
Okay. The other, item is discussion of SEAC membership. And we had three, yes, please. Yes, no, please.
Sorry, in transition, because of the election cycle between your November and December. So, just an update that SEAC had approved a motion to go to board around membership for the Ability Center at the time that they name an alternate. We have not yet received that information, continue to reach out, appreciating the importance and value that Ability Center would bring around the table. We have received a complete application from Grandview Kids Family Council, including that the Family Council is affiliated with Empower Kids Ontario as their provincial affiliate. The nominated member is a parent member of the Family Council who meets the criteria of legislation, Durham resident, not a member of the board, eligible to vote for the board. And their alternate is a Grandview staff member who supports Family Council, is embedded around the table as a member who also meets the criteria. So the request for Grandview Kids Family Council membership around the SEAC table is for you through your chair. We did seek legal counsel again on the traditionally, the organizations and affiliations having voting membership, the same as the member at large positions. And then any additional groups such as the Early Years Consortium, which technically has a seat around the table. Connor, extended the re-invitation to that group this week as an important, Easter Seals had brought that forward as that intersection is really important for us to understand. So Connor reiterated that invitation. But we just looked at the legislation in terms of voting and non-voting. And as staff, we are absolutely non-voting. We are support to SEAC. But our current council's position is, if you're putting somebody around the table, it is with voting authority, and why would you remove voting authority? So we would like to amend the recommendation for Ability Center. We had used language of non-voting, we'd like to amend it to voting membership, again, contingents on an alternate being named. That's one thing. And then the second thing is the receipt of the request from Grandview Kids Family Council as a voting seat. You do have up to 12 association seats around the table, which we are under. Durham, I don't think has ever had to do we have more people and organizations than seats. Some districts have to look at a 4-year cycle. You do have legislative room around the table, so through you.
So again, it's just the whole thing, the regulation does say a parent association. And so that's what it, like, it's very clear there, it's a parent association, so how does that, like, you know, and that's my figure, because then what's going to happen is we could have other organizations that come in that are for-profit services, that they provide services, whatever, and they want a seat around the table. So if the regulation says a parent association that has a provincial chapter. So I'm just really cautious, again, you know, of the interpretation of that regulation.
Yeah.
Because it's supposed to be parent.
Grandview is there.
Yeah, the family council is different because that's parent and, yeah, there's.
My question now with the Ability Center being put forward, if we're talking the legislation, because we were doing a non-voting seat, but they're not a provincial.
They have a provincial reach.
They have provincial reach at the Ability Center, because I thought it was just Durham, thought it was located.
Their clientele, yes.
Okay.
But you could, back to Donna's point, that's legal, that's council's advice to SEAC. SEAC controls its membership, motion for it.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know, it's both groups have voice around the table, like, we're great, we good voice around the table, I'm just, like, I've raised in the past about having an organization that receives funding from the ministry in any capacity, and we're supposed to be an advisory committee. You know what I mean, like, I think you had.
They do them separately, right? So
Yeah.
one is a request from a family council.
Yeah.
That does have provincial affiliate.
Yeah.
In terms of the family council to family council. And the other is an organization that SEAC had a motion. And
Yes,
put a
yeah.
motion to recommend.
For sure.
membership to board.
As
The only nuance is voting or not voting, and whether you hold this non-voting or meant voting, but I would deal with them separately.
Yeah.
Would be my suggestion, but.
I know, I believe that HACON SEAC had a recommendation that SEACs have a policy with respect to memberships, right? And, with respect to, sort of how you make those determinations compared to the number of actual parent council members, because I think one of the nice thing about this table is it's parent, like, it's associations that support parents directly, so it's very much parent voice that kind of flows around the table, right? And there's no kind of business or funding, pressure in a sense that's behind that advice or, that or feedback that we're providing, right?
And we do have that in our responsibilities and obligations around fee for service.
Around ours
Exclusively fee for service, yeah, because we wrote the responsibilities and obligations document
right?
that outlines membership and how membership's built in.
So my question is, do we know how each of these organizations, like, are we talking primarily fee for service or no fee for service in our obligations?
It was
Primarily,
cost to families is a part of the organization, which was the conversation around community growth.
right,
And so other, and Nova's Arc.
yeah, cost to families.
So I think you own them separately. You have the request from Grandview Family Council,
Right,
and there's the advice received from council around Ability Center. But we have not yet received an alternate, so you could put Ability Center to January. Pending again, another reach out for an alternate, because technically it's still not an intact request for membership. Grandview Family Council is.
I don't know, thoughts?
I don't know a lot about Ability Center, but am I correct that it's, as I say, they have membership fees, is it a for-profit business? Or is it a government-funded facility with membership fees that just kind of cover additional costs? Does anyone know?
They do provide services to the board, like through the therapeutic practice. Programs and things like that, so.
So I would suggest, since we're, if there's questions about Ability Center and that nuance, because again, this table put forward a recommendation.
Right.
On, for non-voting.
Right.
Support. So legal advice is being, we're really not in a position to do non-voting, but again, SEAC can do. I would recommend through your chair, we pause that because we do not yet have an alternate name, so it is not an intact recommendation that could go to board at this time, so there's not an urgency for the county. I would move that to the January meeting, and we'll hope again for an alternate to be named. So my suggestion would be to hold the conversation about the Ability Center. If there's questions that need to be answered, send them, we'll get the answers. You have a live, intact, complete request for membership coming from the Family Council of Grandview.
Right.
At this time,
So it's-
live to the table.
So it's the family council at Grandview that's asking for,
Correct.
okay, so it's not Grandview itself, which receives funding, right? Like, is there, and Donna, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just like, pull up the regulation again, and so this is why, and it's, it says, local association means an association or an organization of parents that operates locally within the area of jurisdiction of the board, and that is affiliated with an association or an organization that is not an association or professional educators, but that is incorporated and operates throughout Ontario to further the interest and well-being of one or more groups of exceptional children.
And then further in the legislation, there's additional room, that's the association definition.
Yeah.
And then there's room for additional membership, at the agreement of SEAC, adding perspective to the table, there's room.
Yeah, there is, and I know we had Kennard here, we had resources for exceptional, but they were non-voting members.
Yeah.
Because they did provide, basically, they were basically affiliated with the board, as far as that's concerned, but, yeah.
Okay, so I just looked up Grandview Family Council. You did that as well?
Instead of hearing.
Yeah, so if it's coming from the Grandview Family Advisory Council, Grandview Kids Family Advisory Council is made up of parents or caregivers to Grandview kids. These dedicated, passionate volunteers provide advice and guidance. I'm waiting for my thing to go forward.
And we said provincial affiliations, empowered kids.
Empower kids through the provincial. So yeah, Grandview Kids Family Advocacy Council is made up of parents, caregivers to Grandview kids. These dedicated, passionate volunteers provide advice and guidance from a client and family perspective to improve the planning and delivery of programs and services at the center and across the broader pediatric health system.
Empowered.
Empower kids is their,
So I can plug up empowered.
if it's the,
Ontario.
yeah,
That was your area, is it the same thing?
Grandview currently sits under Rome Catholic and PPR. Under the same regulation.
So I'll just, I'm not sure if I should recuse myself from having any opinion because I sit on the Family Advisory Committee at Grandview. But just as a general kind of principle, I feel comfortable with any family-based group having a vote. More comfortable than if it's, not a specific body that represents family members and caregivers.
I think that at the end of the day, the part that we're concerned with is the potential perception of conflict of interest. Is that's really where the crux of the issue is,
right,
is do we have the potential for a conflict of interest
yes.
with an association that by virtue is affiliated sort of with another larger, but you know what I mean? Like the family council, I get that they're part of a larger whole, which is Grandview. So I don't know, is there a concern about conflict of interest?
I'm not personally concerned about a parents' council that's part of Grandview, because they are parents advising Grandview as well, right?
The alternate is staff member.
The alternate is a staff member, yes. Which,
So yeah, ultimately, if SEAC has questions that you'd like us to go back to the requester with, we can do that.
Because
Bring it back in January as well.
ideally,
I would.
yeah, absolutely no, but ideally, I would think that it would be better if the alternate was also a family representative as opposed to a staff member of Grandview. Right, because currently all the associations that sit around the table, everybody that's here is completely volunteer. We don't receive any remuneration, for being here and sitting at that table, whereas a staff member does, right? And that's, sort of a bit of it's a volunteer kind of thing, so my question to them would they be able to put forward two family representatives as opposed to a family representative and a staff member? Right, because the optics of that could also be as that's an alternate way of getting an organization voice onto the table at the committee, right? At this table.
And it was just
To fulfill the
requirement, in a way that if a parent or caregiver had something on the commitment of the staff member, I think that was the.
No, I'm just thinking of any overall optics, right? Yeah, Kelly, go ahead.
I agree with, bringing questions forward, and so that we can kind of proceed, as we spend some, like, kind of discussing what we're not really sure of, but it was a good discussion, but I think we could just move forward to just say, let's clarify, and then,
Yeah,
so,
on both, yeah, okay. So, go from there, yeah. Okay, moving on then to association reports and committee reports. Do we have any association reports? Karen?
I have wanted to tie into a Down story, so how do we go?
There you go.
So, Down Syndrome Association had their Christmas holiday, party. Just on the 30th of November, or December, no, 30th. They held it down at the Port Whitby Marina. They had a fun time in the morning, early afternoon with the kiddos, the young ones, and Santa Maria parents. And then in the evening, there was 4 hours of revelry and dancing for the teen, preteen, grown-up set, and it was a hoot, honest.
So much fun.
That's so much fun, so much fun. Adam, basically shut the place down as per usual. And actually even my youngest decided to actually come out and danced, was a very versatile in public. So that was, yes, considering how self-conscious like 13, 14-year-olds can be, that was, I was surprised he actually put a toe in the space, but, so it was a lot of fun. I'll show you pictures later if you are all ever inclined.
Awesome. Yeah, Allison, go ahead.
I'll just say that Easter Seals, Ontario is organizing a youth conference in, March. So Ontario-wide for youth, probably held somewhere kind of north of the GTA so that it's relatively accessible for, members from across, the province. So it'll be a youth-only full-day conference.
Great. Any other association or committee reports? No? Okay, moving on to correspondence. The Limestone District, School Board letters to the Ontario College of Teachers. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't get to review this one ahead of time. Did anybody get a chance to review this one? Okay, so, yeah, this is to do, it looks like with, training, spec ed training for teachers in Teachers College and a greater focus on that in Teachers College, which actually kind of makes sense, right? Because the classrooms are now very integrated, so, you know, spec ed, training is really kind of very valuable and important, I would think, in this day and age.
I was gonna say that was a hot topic on the K-12 Education Standards Development Committee. There was a recommendation that was made as far as, of course, that all those recommendations are still sitting with the government as usual. But anyways, that was a very hot topic about that, and really that. Though, again, it's the Ontario Teachers College that has to establish those things and they are also responsible for the monitoring and the quality of the provision of those programs as well. And it's very true, as far as, how, it depends on the instructors who are providing those programs. And some actually are phenomenal, and they bring in external resources and so forth. I've attended as a guest speaker on a couple of them around SEAC and what SEAC does and what trustees do, because a lot of the trustees do it all as well. But yeah, it's a huge thing. It's not, what they say in there is correct, that the programs are not consistent across, the quality of the programs is not consistent across, and then the fact that, you know, the requirements around special education is not there. So, you know, what they say is valid, but it's really up to the Ontario Teachers College. And so it's not the minister, although requests have been made from the minister about certain things around the Ontario, what the Ontario Teacher College should consider, but so.
Sorry, Allison and then Charmy.
Okay, so I just want to clarify, there's the Ontario College of Teachers, and then there's teachers colleges, but we don't actually call them teachers colleges anymore, they're faculties of education. And faculties of education have a lot of leeway in terms of what kinds of courses they offer, and then there are directives, things that we are required to offer by the Ontario College of Teachers. So and I fully agree, and I happen to teach at Faculty of Education, so I fully agree that, that it should absolutely be a key and core component of all programs across the province. That does have to come from above and beyond the faculties of education. That has to come as a directive so that it becomes not just an optional elective thing because a particular faculty feels that's important. So it does need to come from on high, and for that we do need to do some lobbying, both at the ministry level, but also at the Ontario College of Teachers level. I imagine you were gonna say something similar.
Very similar. So I also teach at Faculty of Education as well. And I love that they're doing this. It's exact, and there's probably 5 or 6 other topics that need the same amount of attention within the faculties as well. But like just furthering Allison's point, it really is, academic freedom is huge in academia, in universities, and in the Faculty of Education, there's no difference. And so when you have faculty who haven't set foot in a classroom for over 15, 20 years, and might be teaching special ed, they do not have the lived experience any longer to be able to speak to that. So just to emphasize that point. The other point is that there's, because of the shortage of teachers, the likelihood that faculties are going to go to a 16-month program if they aren't already at a 16-month program is very high, which means something's got to go. So now the time has lessened with the amount of classroom time spent in courses doing work. Something's going to have to go, and the likelihood it's going to be things such as special ed is high. So just things to keep in mind, those of us who are in the know.
So, having said all of that,
But it's great, and I think more
do
work
we
should be done.
echo this? Does our SEAC also write a letter saying, we echo this, and this is why? Right? If we think we should, somebody should make a motion to echo. Allison,
I'll make the motion that we lend our voice to their
follow up with
concern.
that, seconders? Tara, all in favor? Okay, anybody wanna draft it? Anybody wanna take a stab at the first draft? Anybody?
I'll do that.
You'll do it? Awesome, wonderful.
Just will be, I imagine if it's on what's with intersectionality, the other areas.
Yes, we should, if there's intersectionality, we should include that within the letter, absolutely.
And the composite
Mhm.
of centuries.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, moving on then to community concerns. Does anybody have any community concerns to bring up at this time? Tara?
I'm gonna raise this, so as, just as a follow-up to the thing that I had talked about last month. I was at Lakeside, Public School, this past month. The principal there wanted to hold what he called a listening session. And invited families and parents and caregivers from students within Lakeside and friends, so we got a couple of other folks coming in as well, just, because of interest. To talk about, how we're doing, specifically, Mr. Wrigley's point. How are we doing at Lakeside? What can we do to improve and that sort of thing? We sort of had an agenda. I came there from the SEAC, I sat and represented. And it was a really, really great evening. We weren't really quite sure how it was gonna go, but we ended up with a really very organic, very natural, very honest and candid conversation about a whole bunch of things. And what when Joe and I actually talked afterward, what we saw was the start of the community. Yeah, for the parents at the school. It was, we had parents who had been there, done that, worn up the t-shirt 27 times already. We had folks who were there, we had folks from the SEAC, we had a family there who had literally just had their child starting the assessment process, so we have the full gamut of stuff, and parent was, I don't know what I'm talking about, saying, oh, honey, I got this, and it was fantastic. That in that way, I was sort of there sitting, oh, you know what, I'm gonna have to write that down, I gave Renee a couple of times, that sort of thing, so for me, it was, we had originally thought that perhaps we could use this as sort of like CX coming to you for this, I'm like, honestly, this was all about the school and how we make these kids' lives better, and I'm here to support and bring things back to CX if I'm hearing common themes and that sort of stuff, so that I'll probably, I can share just sort of like in a debrief note and things like that, but, we're probably planning on having follow-up later in the school year. And if anyone, if there's any other interest for other schools, if they wanna maybe hold one, that sort of thing, so, this really is very, keen to share his experiences and, help maybe perpetuate this as another way of creating more communities within the other schools as well across the region. It was really great, like very completely informal. We were sitting around the high tables just chit chatting with some coffee, and 2 hours went like that, like without even full games. It's great.
I think the very best part of that is the community that you said built out, because it does happen, right? And people then felt alone, no longer felt alone.
Yeah, it was that, that sounds like my child, and all of a sudden it was a support group that was starting to get created. It was,
We all remember
phenomenal.
being that parent,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That parent who was just starting that process, we all remember that.
Yeah, so. That's awesome. Yeah, and to be also from that as well, talking about sort of actionable items that kind of came out of that conversation. We had like 2 or 3 different things that was really wrote down, so these are things I'm gonna talk to staff about, that sort of thing, so he actually did write it. He was a fantastic listener and summarized everything, and it was really great, so. Yeah, saying that, it's really good.
Does anybody have any questions for Tara on that?
Not a question or a comment, whenever people hold space for a group of people, beautiful things happen. I've been in experiences like that for other topics, so huge kudos to that administrator that understood that, understands his community and understands his role in doing distributive leadership, because that's what you have to do. You have to be very vulnerable as an administrator to be able to hold space like that and not have an agenda and not have a PowerPoint going and not have certain things that people have to do in certain ways and just leaving the space open. So I think that's amazing, and that administrator should document, I'm sure they have, I hope they are, documenting the experience that they're having so that they can share that out when they meet with other administrators. Because I know they
I believe that was the plan when we talked about it. Gotta share this out.
Can I add something for the community?
Yeah.
So I had a parent reach out to me who's a recent, their children just started in Durham, came from another board, and one of their children has an IEP. But if somebody wouldn't mind, we don't have to have a conversation as a group, but if somebody who has some kind of insight, I know there's many people here who do, would be willing to spend a couple minutes with me, so I could just, because she feels that she did not receive an IEP by the end of October and is very highly concerned. So, and has been given different messaging about, well, we don't do that here in this board, so. There's confusion, and I'm confused as well.
Yeah, Connor.
David said, happy to have the conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Heard a few times, this is not for our board, but I heard another board, we don't do that here.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, between
All boards do it, actually, it's law, so,
that's what I'm saying, so if it is, and there's a standard to it, then how are boards still in this day in 2024 saying, I have my child's an IEP, here's what the IEP was, and I said, well, we don't, for that, we don't have IEPs here in our board for that.
Connor, it's got you. Connor's got it. Tara, if you could do that debrief, and maybe we can circulate with the next month's stuff, that would be fantastic, because that might actually help the discussion around survey. Right, that's the first thing that popped in my head is, you had a
It would be
conversation
great to
with
hear from
parents.
that administrator, in
Yeah.
terms of how he's using that and how he's using the data that he's getting with staff, how he's sharing it with staff, and what impact that they are seeing, based on
to come.
Pretty much comes.
So I can certainly have, because I'm probably gonna be following up with him in a week, so anyway, so I can. Yeah, throw that in there. Every month. All right, any other community concerns? No, okay, celebrations and successes, that was a celebration.
Yeah, so that was a
That's a
celebration.
celebration,
That's a
yeah.
celebration for sure.
And a success.
Yeah.
No.
It's not necessarily, a celebration, but just something that I attended, that I think it was the first ever, the town of Ajax held their first ever International Day for Persons with Disabilities event, at St. Francis, Community, Theater and Center. And what they presented was actually, it was called A New Story. It's actually a 3-part mini documentary about 3 individuals. And like, they're all Ontario people, which was great. Lily, who, a young lady who has Down syndrome, who's a fashion model. Actually lives in Richmond Hill. Elliot, and who basically is a rugby player. He lives here in Durham. I believe he went to school in Durham. And basically is also assistant coach at the Ability Center.
Did you say Elliot?
Yes. Yes. Elliot, so he, Elliot, and then there was also, it was, as I said, it was the 3-part, and one was, about Kirby, a 49-year-old man living on his own, with support and sort of the family's perspective of how we got there. And really the sharing of the information about sometimes parents, that particular, sometimes parents also hold back for our own children because we want to bubble wrap them as well. But it was really, really great. And then they had a panel discussion afterwards, and the panel consisted of Lily and her mother, Elliot and his mother, the filmmaker Robert, and the coach of the rugby team. And it was really, really a great, they had questions, and then there was audience questions that were allowed to, and it was really, really great. And Victoria and I got to speak to a few of them afterwards as well. Victoria's made a new contact and is going to be adding to her Down syndrome presentation as far as Lily is concerned. So that's really, really great. But one of the things that was really neat about the coach that was there was also an executive with a major company. And he basically said when he first started coaching it's a multi-abilities, basically rugby team, and they went internationally to the World Cup and they came in second. But when he first started coaching, he said he really didn't get it and really didn't enjoy it and he couldn't hear it, but then it finally clicked. And he says, but also what it has an impact on his job because he's an executive in a major company, and he now recognizes some things and even the way he deals with employees, etc. So that was really a cool thing when I had the discussion with him. So it was a really good thing. And as I said, there are really local people, Ontario people, and I passed on the information to Andrea. But it was a really great event to actually go see, and it was their first event as the town of Ajax put on, and I was really, I just would hope that theater was overflowing, but it wasn't, but there's still a great line of people, so I thought that was really good. And other than that, my son got his G2. I don't know if that's a success or not. But it is.
All right, Elliot is a bit of that superstar and inspiration for many things that we're happy to be part of this
Many
pathway.
memories.
Yes,
Many
yes.
memories.
Yeah, he is quite a phenomenal. I imagine the other 2 individuals are just as. Elliot leaves a legacy of inspiring people in terms of programming and kids' excellence.
Yeah. So just, food for thought when it comes to sharing those experiences even wider is really, really important as far as that's concerned. So, yeah.
Elliot is an author as well.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Stuff
resume.
He does have quite a resume, strengths and abilities, yes.
Yes, it does.
And achievements.
But every one of them offered to come and speak and that they show the films and so, you know, and they can tailor to whatever, so.
Awesome. All right, any other bummers and successes? Okay, our next meeting is January 9th, 2025, right here. Motion to adjourn. Sarah, second, Allison, all in favor? All right, thanks, guys. See you next year.